Fellow Rotarians, yes, we're very honoured today to have Mark Richardson, who's a councillor with the High Commission, with us. And as you can see, he has preempted his own introduction. And I've got something up on the screen. He's been in his current post since 2013. And it's to ease relationship between Canada and England in terms of trade. So we should have a fascinating presentation. Fellow Rotarians, I present Mark.
Please excuse me, I'm going to address you from over here so I can move the computer along the slides. Thank you very much for the introduction. I was asked to give a bit of a presentation on Canada overall, the Canadian economy, oil production in Canada, some of the topics I was asked to touch on were oil production, fracking, tourism, and then I've also left time, hopefully we'll have time for a bit of a Q&A, and if you have any other questions that I don't cover, please feel free to ask them. Also, please feel free to stop me at any point if I'm either speaking too quickly, too softly, or if you have a question about anything that I've said. Again, my name is Mark Richardson. I run our sector and innovation team at the High Commission here in London. And that means that I run a group of about 14 people, all of whom are dedicated to building the Canadian and UK commercial relationship. And what that means from a day-to-day basis is that we work principally with Canadian companies to help them establish themselves here in the United Kingdom, either selling goods or services, sometimes setting up operations. And we also work with UK companies who are interested in expanding their presence in North America to convince them on the business case of why they should go to Canada as opposed to the United States or Mexico. Really, though, we have an interest globally in seeing the Canadian and the British trade, commercial investment relationship grow, because when one of us succeeds, the other will succeed as well. So, some of you may know a little bit about Canada, some of you may not know a lot, so I thought I would start with just a few facts and figures about Canada from a geographic perspective. We are the second largest country in the world by landmass, and I did, about a year ago, I did a calculation of dividing the landmass of the United Kingdom into Canada. It fits in roughly 45 times. So Canada is 45 times the size of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom would fit just over 4 times into the province of British Columbia, which is the darkest green on the left side of the screen, to give you an indication of the size of Canada. By far, the majority of our landmass is actually in the north, so the gray and bluish. It's deceptively small on this picture, but in fact that is by far the majority of our landmass. We have a population of approximately 35 million people, which is half of what is in the United Kingdom, and the majority of our population lives within about 200 miles of the border with the United States. We have huge natural reserves, from the largest reserves of fresh water in the world to reserves of metals, oils, and gas, precious metals. We're surrounded by 3 oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Arctic Ocean, and we have the world's largest coastline, and we share the world's largest border, which is 9,000 kilometers with the United States. We are a federation, which, depending on how things go today, you may be too. We have 10 provinces and 3 territories. And we have devolved a lot of power and authority to our provinces. Things like healthcare, education, infrastructure, natural resources are all managed at the provincial and territorial level. The things that are managed by the national and the federal government are defense, taxation policy at the federal level, international relations, and we have things like the financial system, and actually our postal system is national as well. And we have 2 official languages, English and French. The majority of our population is Anglophone, but we do have quite a large French-speaking population, which is principally centered in the province of Quebec, although there are large pockets of French-speaking Ontarians and in Saskatchewan and across Canada. Our economy is perhaps one of the one of the things that people have heard a lot about us in the news recently is the strength of our economy. If you track Financial Times, The Economist, Canada has been celebrated for our boringness, perhaps, is one of the terms that's been used to describe us, because we have a stable and predictable economy, regulatory system, and financial system. We have in numerous years, in the past 10 years, and this slide needs to be updated because it remains true this previous year, our economy is one of the top performers in the G7. We have the #1 rated banking system from a stability perspective by Moody's for I think the last 6 or 7 years. And we were one of the first G7 economies to recover after the global recession. We have remained relatively strong and isolated from many of the troubles that you yourselves have faced and have faced in the United States. From a business perspective, we are one of the places that is easiest to do business in the world. You can set up a business in a matter of days. I think it's just 24 to 48 hours in Canada. We have the lowest net-to-debt GDP ratio in the G7, and our government is on track to be in a surplus position that is deficit-free from the annual budgeting perspective as of next year. We have the second lowest overall business costs in the G7. We always use the United States as our benchmark, and we have better lower overall business costs than the U.S., and a better overall corporate income tax rate, 13% lower than in the United States. From an innovation standpoint, which is one of these buzzwords that's quite common now, it's basically investments in research and development and creating new products. We are perhaps one of the most aggressive when it comes to tax incentives to companies, to corporations to do research and development in Canada. And we have a very healthy education system. It's not something that we've necessarily marketed, but we have a very, very strong education system. And we have actually one of the highest educated populations in the world in terms of those who hold post-secondary degrees. So, Canada-UK relationships. Well, we have incredibly deep and strong political, social, cultural, and commercial ties. We share the same queen. We were a colony, and we have grown out of the United Kingdom. Canada and the UK are the only 2 nations in the world to jointly be members of the Commonwealth, the G7, the G20, NATO, the OECD, the Organization of Economic, thank you, and the WTO, the World Trade Organization. Our governments, and particularly this government here in the UK and the current government in Canada, under Prime Ministers Harper and Prime Minister Cameron, have a very, very close bilateral relationship and have sought to jointly develop that from an economic, political, and defense perspective. From a defense and security perspective, we have been partners in 2 world wars, and our armed forces have continued to partner in numerous operational theaters around the world, whether it be NATO, Libya, other places where we've both been sending our armed forces to be engaged. We're also, from a security perspective, we are part of the Five Eyes, which is a group of 5 countries that shares intelligence and security information. So we have a very close relationship. If you're familiar with the Joint Strike Fighter, we are both, Canada and the UK are both partners in that from an industrial perspective. And potentially we're in the process of making our decision to replace our current fighter fleet, aircraft fighter fleet, and the F-35 or the Joint Strike Fighter may be the aircraft that's chosen. And what I know best is actually our commercial and economic relationship. As I said, I run our sector and innovation team, which is part of the Trade and Economic Group within the High Commission. And we celebrate the fact that the UK is Canada's second. The UK is Canada's most important trading and commercial partner in the European Union, and you're our fifth largest trading and commercial partner overall, after the United States, Mexico, China, and Japan. I think are the four that are ahead of the UK. Interestingly, the UK was the fourth largest, but has been superseded by China in recent years. And I think everybody's trading relationship, frankly, with China has evolved considerably. The United Kingdom is our fourth largest export destination. For the UK, Canada is the sixth largest export destination for your products. You are our second largest source of foreign direct investment, meaning, the third largest source of foreign direct investment, meaning after you fall under the United States and actually the Netherlands, of all places, are our top two sources of foreign direct investment. The Netherlands because of Royal Dutch Shell, and then the UK comes after that. Examples of UK companies in Canada, there's many, but all of your major energy companies have investments in Canada. Centrica, British Gas, British Petroleum, BP, Rolls-Royce, you name it, they've got it. Engineering and services firms have massive investments across Canada. Interestingly, the UK is our second largest destination for Canadian investment coming out of Canada and going international. We have done a survey, and we have about 700 plus Canadian companies who have invested in the United Kingdom. And our rough estimate, it probably wouldn't stand up to a serious economist putting it to the test, but our rough estimate is that we provide Canadian companies provide approximately 100,000 direct jobs in the United Kingdom. And one of the things that we would like to see long term is the Canadian and the UK relationship from a commercial perspective shift from being one that was focused on trade or selling each other widgets effectively or services to one that's focused on investment, where companies are investing in each other's countries, which means that they're directly creating jobs, manufacturing in each other's countries. And the trade will follow. If we invest in each other's countries, the trade will follow suit. One of the big things that is quite new and that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on is the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement between Canada and the European Union. The technical negotiations of this agreement, which you may or may not have heard of, it hasn't actually received a lot of attention in the press here in the UK or in Europe. You've probably heard of the TTIP, which is the Trans-Pacific Trade and Investment Partnership between the European Union and the United States. CETA is actually similar trade agreement, but we're done negotiating, whereas those are still very much in process. Technical negotiations for our trade agreement with the European Union, which includes the United Kingdom, were finished this past August. We're now in the legal review process, which means that once everything is done, it's translated in 24 different European languages, it's gone through multiple lawyers, multiple reviews, it should be ratified and enforced the summer of 2016. What that means is that 96% of all tariff lines or goods will be able to trade free from tariffs, tariff-free, on day one that the good goes into force. So that's 96% of all tariff lines, which is a massive game changer. I don't know if anybody is in fish and seafood here, but that is one of the places where we'll see huge benefits for the UK economy, which is a large importer of fish and seafood. I noticed that we had, most likely, the prawns that we ate in our appetizer were cold water prawns, and they either came from Canada or potentially from Iceland, but chances are they came from Canada. And they will enter in at a lower duty rate than they currently are, so they'll be cheaper. I don't know that you'll see that in your menu prices, but they should be cheaper from an import perspective. The other thing that we're quite excited about, we've just recently launched in the last couple of weeks, the Technology Accelerator here in London. We have our first cohort of 6 Canadian technology companies that are here that we're working with quite intensively to help them grow their business in the UK. Some are here looking for venture capital funding, some are here looking for partners, some are looking for channel distributions. They're in the financial technology space, the health technology space. But ultimately, we have a great partnership with organizations like London and Partners and the UK Trade and Investment, who see these 6 companies who are spending 3 months of their time here as prospective investors in the UK economy. We see them the same way. And if we can help them grow their business and have a sufficient business case for them to then set up an operation in the United Kingdom, that's exactly the type of success that we're looking at spending our time to help facilitate. So some of the areas where we see opportunities between Canada and the United Kingdom and where we're spending our time are in the areas of aerospace and defense, agriculture, fish and seafoods. Clean technology, this is largely your alternative energy sources. Financial services, a very large one for what we do in London. Education is a growing area where we're very much encouraging UK students to consider Canada as an attractive international study destination, and trying to attract Canadian students to come over here as well. Because if students can early on study and experience our cultures, further on, that partnership and that knowledge of each other's countries can only benefit us. Green build and infrastructure, information communication technologies, I mentioned our technology accelerator. Life sciences, so these are things like dealing with the National Health Services, mining, oil and gas, and ocean technology. These are the main areas where we're focusing our effort to grow the commercial relationship between Canada and the UK. So I was asked to spend a little bit of time talking about oil production in Canada. You may or may not know, but Canada has the 3rd largest proven oil reserve in the world, after Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. 98% of our oil reserves are in our oil sands, which you may have heard of. Oftentimes are referred to here as tar sands, but the actual proper term is bitumen. And of course in Canada we don't call them tar sands, we call them oil sands. We currently are producing approximately 3.5 million barrels of oil per day. Again, the majority of that is in the oil sands. And if investment rates hold the way they are for the next 15 years, we see that those will be doubled at the end of the 15 years. So we'll be up to about 7 million barrels of oil per day. That makes us currently the 5th largest producer of oil-based energy in the world. And we are the #1 oil sands producer. And there's huge, one of the things that we spend some time doing, and we don't really have to convince the energy markets because they already know, but we do spend some time going and giving information to the large energy companies about, and also the support companies that are involved in the oil and gas sector, about opportunities to invest in Canada. As you can imagine, with this type of growth in oil production and exploration, there's huge infrastructure and service and support opportunities that come in behind that. That's a major area where we see opportunities for UK companies. In terms of the way, I don't know how much you know about oil sands, but we thought it might be interesting to spend a little bit of time explaining how they're actually extracted. It is a Canadian innovation. It's only really become economically feasible in the last decade with the price of oil going up, and as technology has developed largely through partnerships between industry, government, and academic researchers in Canada. Basically, there are 2 ways to extract oil from the oil sands. The first is in situ, what we call in situ, and the second is surface, or we refer to it as mining. So it's effectively mining. So for anything that is deeper than 75 meters under the ground, we use in situ, and that's the picture that's here. Essentially, it's incredibly complex technically, but the explanation is relatively simple. We pump steam under the ground, we heat up the sand, that separates the sand and the oil, and then the oil pools, and we extract it with a well, just like you would extract the oil with a typical well. Of course, the actual technology to make that all happen is incredibly complicated. It's taken a long time to develop. The other way that we extract it is for anything that's 75 meters below the surface and above. It's mining, where it's mining. It's basically take it out with an excavator, put it into a dump truck, and take it to the facility. It does exactly the same thing. Water is used to heat up the sand, or the bitumen to separate the oil and the bitumen, and that is the oil is taken off of it. We are very cognizant that many people around the world, and many Canadians as well, see this as an extremely environmentally unfriendly oil source. And so huge investments have gone and continue to go into research to reduce the environmental impacts of extracting oil from the oil sands. We've invested $7 billion Canadian into carbon capture and storage, which is an area where the UK has actually done quite a bit of research investment as well. This is effectively sequestering or trapping carbon, typically in underground sinks, underground storage facilities of some kind or another. And our research and the investment that's gone into it has actually had tangible impacts. Between 1990 and 2009, we've actually reduced the greenhouse gas emissions from the oil sands extraction process by 30%. And we're also using, we've invested a lot into, companies I should say, have invested a lot into reducing the amount of water that's used to extract the oil from the oil sands, because, as I've said, it uses steam and hot water, so it's a very water-intensive process. Of course, there are very strict environmental regulations to ensure that the water that's used is not put back into the natural water sources, into the rivers that it's taken or the aquifers that it's taken from. And in fact, to the greatest extent possible, that water is being recycled. Another area where I was asked to spend a little bit of time was on fracking, which has been an incredibly controversial subject here. But it's really, from a Canadian perspective, sometimes we wonder why. Because we've been doing fracking since the 1940s. And we have used hydraulic fracturing since the 1940s, as I said, and we've done well over 175,000 wells in North America. Since 2012 alone, we've drilled 11,800 wells, and the majority of those were done hydraulically or hydraulically fractured. If you're not familiar with the term, what it actually means is you're effectively drilling with water and small bits of sand or rock. And it's a very complex, it's become, hydraulic fracturing itself, as I said, it's been around since the 1940s. But the way it's used in drilling technology today is much more complex than it was way back when. And so you can actually drill both vertically and horizontally or diagonally these days. And a lot of that is used to access pockets of gas or oil that weren't previously accessible. So because of the change in technology, we now have 8% of the world's gas proven reserves. We are currently, this is natural gas reserves, and we are the 5th largest producer of natural gas in the world, something that a lot of people don't know. As I said, we've used hydraulic fracking quite a bit, and it has not garnered anywhere near the same amount of attention or pushback from local populations as it has here. Now, one of the key differences, though, is that the majority of the sites where we have natural gas pockets that would be accessed through fracking are in quite rural areas. And so there hasn't necessarily been a population that's close by to really be worried about the impacts. That said, we have been tracking it very carefully, and to date there has been according to our regulator, no significant negative environmental impact as a result of hydraulic fracturing in Canada. That said, there are moratoriums in place in Quebec, and I believe in one other province, to not allow any fracking to access natural gas wells until more study is done and more engagement with the population is done. How long those moratoriums will remain in place, I don't know. The reality is that one of the things that we've seen or we've noticed, or I've noticed, I should say, this is a bit of a personal comment, is that when you have the energy and there's a demand, oftentimes attitudes towards how that energy is used shift and become much more open as the energy is needed, frankly. You use what you have when you need it. We have, in terms of potential shale gas in Canada, we have, I don't know if you know the geography, but there are pockets of it all across Canada. But the main extraction of natural gas in Canada right now is in the province of Alberta, and to a certain extent in British Columbia. Those are the two provinces where the majority of it is happening. So I've talked about us having the third largest proven oil reserve, being the fifth largest producer of oil-based energy, and I think I said the eighth or sixth largest producer of natural gas. So why don't you see more Canadian energy in the European market? One of the problems is we, to a certain extent, our oil and our energy reserves are landlocked. And that doesn't make a lot of sense for a country that's bordered by 3 oceans, but we don't currently have the infrastructure to connect into our coastlines. And that is something that is very much on the radar for both industry and government in trying to facilitate the construction of new pipelines. So pipelines and infrastructure to make it happen. Right now there are 7 major pipeline projects that are in play across Canada and in the United States. One that you may or may not have heard of is the Keystone XL pipeline, which is a bit of a politically divisive issue between Canada and the United States because the current U.S. administration hasn't signed off on the deal. But if that pipeline were to go into place, there would be a direct pipeline from Alberta, which is the epicenter of oil sands production in Canada, right down to the Gulf Coast refineries, which supply, I believe, 30% of their products are being sold into the European market. So there's a huge number of projects happening between reversing existing pipelines so that instead of going from the east to the center of Canada, they actually flow from the center to the east of Canada in an effort to move both oil and gas reserves, or I guess production, the ability to move our assets to the east and west coasts to get them both here to Europe and to Asia. And this is something that every major producer is trying to do right now around the world, is ensure that they have the infrastructure to get the energy to the markets where it's desired. The other main way that we move our oil is by rail. And so there's a very robust rail network in Canada. And in fact, so much of our oil was going by rail that earlier this year, our Minister of Transport had to set forth a regulation, a proclamation to require the rail companies to move a certain amount of grain. Because we are one of the major, Canada is one of the breadbaskets of the world. We are one of the major exporters of wheat and pulses, and the oil companies will pay more than the wheat companies will. So we were having issues of getting our agricultural goods to market because they weren't being transported by rail, which is the traditional way. So there are now regulations in place to ensure that a certain hundreds of thousands or hundreds of millions of tons of grain are being moved by rail on a monthly basis, and not all of that is being taken up by energy and other things. Even when the pipelines go into place, right now our rail network across North America is playing a very important part in getting oil into refineries, particularly in the northeast United States. Even when the pipelines if they all go forward and everything happens, rail will remain an important transportation avenue for oil in Canada. And of course, there are opportunities there for folks looking for investment opportunities. Lastly, the last area that I was mentioned that I should touch on was tourism. And interestingly, after the United States, the United Kingdom is our most important source of tourism. And when you ask UK citizens why they're coming to Canada, oftentimes they'll tell you it's because they're coming to visit family or friends. And it's just, I think the statistics in terms of the numbers of UK citizens who are coming to Canada for tourism on an annual basis is a really great indicator of the ties that our two nations share. And one of the things we say in the High Commission is you don't have to scratch far below the surface between many Canadians to find either a Scotsman or someone from England or Wales, we have been a great source of immigration, or a great destination of immigration from the United Kingdom over the years. In fact, my own family come from the Derbyshire area and from down in the Devon area. So all my roots in the are UK roots. Whereas my wife's from German, which is interesting. So I might just leave you with one quote. One of the things that our High Commissioner likes to say is, Canada may not be your most important friend, but we are the United Kingdom's best friend. Please don't forget it, because we don't. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk about anything that was in the deck or anything else that's top of mind.
Knew it, didn't we?
I noticed with the last graph there that there's no mentions of Far Eastern other than Japanese and Chinese. There's nothing about Indian, Afghanistan or any of those people that we're having a problem with. Are you now getting into that problem or not?
In terms of from an immigration perspective?
Yeah.
Not a problem. I think we don't necessarily
It's a long way to go across.
The ties between Canada and India, Canada and Pakistan, again, it's been another huge source of immigration for us. So we have huge pockets all across Canada, but there are huge. There are very large communities of people of Indian origin in the west coast of Canada and Toronto. So. It's an area. It's probably our largest immigration center in the world is actually in India, between India and China. So it is an area where there's still a lot of focus and attention, and you have to be careful and know what you're doing, obviously, because there's so many people, and many of them, not all of them are people that you necessarily want to come to Canada. But I don't know that we have the same problem. What problem are you referring to, perhaps? That's the question I should have asked.
Just numbers.
Just numbers. Yeah. Frankly, we're harder to get to. There's probably fewer direct flights. But in terms of numbers, no.
The other thing is...
We've got so much space. That's the other thing. I mean, keep in mind that the UK fits into Canada more than 40 times, and we've got half your population.
Do you have a standard of, say, education and perhaps affluence or whatever before you're allowed in Canada?
Yes, we have a very targeted immigration system with very specific targets based on skill sets, education requirements, and caps based on certain areas, looking for on a country by country basis.
It's outside.
Point system. We do have a point system.
I don't know whether you are aware, only last Friday, the other kind of music to promote pluralism in Canada. And I was not wrongly said. That's what it's my community here.
I am actually aware, and interestingly enough, our High Commissioner here, Gordon Campbell, who was previously the Premier of British Columbia, one of our 10 provinces, and before that he was the Mayor of Vancouver. He has just recently been appointed by our Minister of Foreign Affairs as our ambassador or a key representative to the Aga Khan. So we think it's wonderful that the Aga Khan would decide to open their museum in Canada. I think it's a testament to the success of Canada of being a country that not only is open to pluralism and difference, but seeks to celebrate it. And I think that's our roots are very much in Europe in many ways, and with our Aboriginal peoples. But we are a country of immigrants. We're a young country. We're a country that very much celebrates, seeks to celebrate and highlight the diversity that exists. And what unites us as a country, I think, are our adherence or our beliefs in certain core values: democracy, human rights, just integrity and respect. And the the fact that the Aga Khan has chosen to open his museum that they've chosen to open the museum in Canada, I would like to think it's a reflection of that.
I think it's kind of really proud.
Sure, it should be.
Subhash, what do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Now, my question is, in the early stages, you said that British companies can go and set up their British company in Canada and vice versa. What about those who want to set up a new business? Do you have any facility or any advice on them? What is the most important business they can go and set up a new company?
We do. In fact, we have. I'm not responsible for it, but we have a dedicated investment team to talk to people. Exactly, ask them the right questions in terms of what would that prospective investor be looking to achieve? What type of business are they looking to set up? And depending on the business and the types of inputs that they're looking for, as well as the types of distribution networks that they may be looking for, the types of business support, labor they may be looking for, we would go down and look and help them build a business case to make a wise choice, hopefully, as to the best place to set up in Canada.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes, some few years ago, there was a lot of stuff in the press about lack of organisation between English speaking and French speaking, particularly in relation to Quebec. And when in fact the French president at the time talked about Quebec Libre, writing guys in English, which was obviously very good. Is that still a problem? Or is it lapsed and is no longer and could be used for positive reasons?
So if I understand the question right, you're referring to Quebec sovereignty and the movement that was to succeed from the Canadian state. I wouldn't characterize it as a problem. It remains a challenge in the sense that there are still people in Quebec who would like to secede and would like to see Quebec be a sovereign nation. I think the numbers are less today than they were in the 1990s when we had our most recent referendum. I think there have been concerted efforts from the federal government to try and appease a lot of the sense in Quebec that they weren't necessarily getting the attention that they should, or the recognition that they should for being a distinct society, perhaps. One of the things that happened under the current government, under Prime Minister Harper, is he recognized Quebec as a nation within a nation, is the term that he used. But it was simply to recognize the fact that Quebec is a distinct nation of people within the nation of Canada. But I think that there's, as we were discussing earlier, I was discussing with one of your colleagues earlier, there are a variety of factors as to why it's a less burning issue today than it was back in the 90s. But it hasn't gone away. And just to give you a very concrete example, the most recent provincial elections saw the Parti Québécois, which is the sovereigntist party or the separatist party, go from a majority to almost losing all of their seats in the Quebec Parliament. So they still have seats, and they still exist, and they still have supporters, but at the current time, they're not the same force that they have been in the past.
I think what's missing is General de Gaulle. If General de Gaulle was back, it would all be okay.
He did certainly have some very strong opinions on that weren't necessarily helpful at the time from a Canadian federal perspective.
Subhash, you have a question?
Suppose-
I'm sorry. We should sit still.
I just want to know if you have a social security benefit system similar to the UK, and if you do, and is it available to the immigrants at the immigrants land in your country, or do you have any restrictions like those payments?
We do have restrictions. You have to have worked for a certain amount of time. Immigrants, if they come on as refugee claims, it's very different. There's a system of benefits right away. But there is, I'm not an expert in this area, but my understanding is there is a certain amount of time that you have to qualify for what we call it employment insurance in Canada. We used to call it unemployment insurance, but now we call it employment insurance. So there are some restrictions, yes. But we do have a system of benefits, just like there are very similar challenges, just like there is anywhere in the world that has a system of social benefits.
Rob, would like to give a thanks about please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mark, that was the most interesting and all-encompassing part of Africa that I'm sure I know very few of us will ask about. I'm sorry that we hadn't got time for you to bring in any of the holiday side, the beauty and all that sort of thing in Canada, of which I know quite a bit because, well, I've been over there many times. Is it possible to get somebody from your organisation to come and talk about the holiday side at some future date?
Sure, if you would, what I would suggest is we would get someone from the Canadian Tourism Commission who have an office here in London. You can speak to that much more authoritatively.
Well, not straight away, but 6 months time or something, yeah.
Please send me a message if you're
I'll give you a ring.
interested. Yeah, give me a ring or send me a note.
Thank you very much. That's interesting to your part of the